Have you ever been curious about what was going behind the scenes of The Godfather? From the studio battles going on and the mafia members casting actors, there were a number of surprising things about the creation of The Godfather. In this video, we will explore 20 weird facts that most of you did not know about The Godfather. So let's begin. The studio did not want Brando. Number 20. Actually, there was no way that anyone could have foreseen Marlon Brando as the face of The Godfather. Paramount Pictures, the studio, did not like Brando one bit. Why? Brando had a reputation of acting strangely, meaning that he was unreliable and consistently late to the set. However, one man had a vision, and that man was the film's director, Francis Ford Coppola. He believed that Brando, with his acting talent, could play the character of the mysterious and powerful Don Vito Corleone. However, he had a hard time trying to convince Paramount Pictures that his plan of putting Brando and The Godfather was a good one. Coppola had a hard time trying to convince Paramount Pictures that his plans were good. However, he agreed, and Brando agreed, but with a number of strict conditions. He had to work without a pay, and he had to audition like everyone else. However, there was one final condition that he had to agree to, and Brando did agree. He had to pay a $1 million bond just to ensure that he did not misbehave. It worked, and Brando was such a good actor that everyone was shocked. Even the studio that did not like him. Brando gave one of the most famous performances of movie history. All because of Brando, The Godfather is a masterpiece. The highest paid actor was. Number 19. You'll never guess who the highest paid actor was. You're probably thinking of Brando, Pacino, and maybe even Al Khan. However, there is one person that beats them all. He is none other than Richard Castellano, Big Paul Castellano's brother. He acted as Peter Clemenza, a member of the Corleone family, and did whatever dirty work they had him do. He actually won a number of awards for his acting performance in Lovers and Other Strangers. The set was paying him the most because he was a celebrity and a name, and he was actually bigger in fame and image compared to stars like Brando. However, Castellano was not with The Godfather for a long time. He was asking for too much money for The Godfather 2. So he was forced to let another actor take over his role, Clemenza. Since another actor took over his role in a sequel, this decision led to events that would follow in The Godfather series. Everyone is still trying to figure out how Castellano would have been a part of it. Al Pacino was not the first choice for his role. Number 18. Al Pacino was not the first choice for his role. Now, let us discuss actor Michael Corleone, who holds one of the most central roles within this movie. Indeed, one may think that Al Pacino, who is a celebrity, would be suited for this role. But surprise, surprise, his directors did not like him one single bit. The problem was that he was not a hugely popular actor at that time, and his only role was a mere cameo in The Panic in Needle Park. That actor would have been even bigger, like Warren Beatty, Robert Redford, and even Jack Nicholson. Coppola really wanted to give this role to Pacino because he was convinced that he was able to bring to life this role alone. The struggle was not over. The rather stupid management of his movie actually asked for his firing thrice during the making of his movie because he did not like his performance. Paisano still proved them all wrong, though, and Coppola remained resolute in his decision. To this date, his role in Michael Corleone is actually regarded by almost everyone as one of movie magic, establishing his credentials within Hollywood circles as one of the greatest actors ever. That is all. This is actually how behind-the-scenes events may actually alter a movie's cast. But, of course, movie making is not a walk in a walk. Marlon Brando used cue cards. Number 17. Brando used cue cards. Did you actually know that a lot of actions Marlon Brando did within The Godfather were actually relayed through his cue cards? It was an accepted fact that Brando could do anything on stage, but when it came to The Godfather, he set the bar much higher. Brando, being one of the most renowned stars in Hollywood, relied on cue cards to recall his dialogue. Although it looked rather unusual for such a renowned performance, the reason was the script itself. The script was completely rewritten with plenty of changes right at the end by the filmmakers. Most of the changes were carried out right before the shooting, so the actors did not have any time to learn the script. It was due to his experience and style that Brando turned it into an opportunity. He did not need to recall the dialogue. He read it from cards, and it was perfectly fine for his role. However, it sometimes caused Brando trouble, as his style of preferring cards to recall dialogue added to the impression that he was very difficult to work with. You wouldn't feel as though he was reading when he was performing, though. He clearly talked to the audience and drew them in, and they ended up believing everything he said to them. Brando's use of cards did not have any effect on how realistic the movie was. It was the fact that he was able to express the dialogue as something much greater that his performance remained one of the greatest ever in the movie realm. Number 16. The movie was on the brink of being withdrawn. There were certain complications when the movie The Godfather was to be produced. Actually, the film was not an idea that was liked much by the filmmakers at Paramount Pictures. People felt that the movie was too dangerous, too ambitious, and too costly to produce. It was always a struggle to produce the movie, as the director, Coppola, was only allowed to work with a mere budget of $2.5 million to start off the production. The director was always fighting as a consequence. However, the very concept was not something that Coppola wanted to let go. When he wanted to film the story about the Corleones, it was only natural to go back in time and go for a hefty budget in the movie. The other members did not have his vision in the movie. They thought that they could set the movie in the contemporary times so that they would save money, but the movie wouldn't seem realistic enough. They also disagreed on the tempo, acting, and even shooting mob scenes on location. Coppola fought bravely for funding before eventually getting another injection from the company. However, this came with great reluctance on their part. In the end, this movie would go on to end up costing $6 million, and this would end up being quite a bit higher than initially anticipated. This would mark where the magic truly began, because The Godfather would go on to be a huge success around the world. They would go on to take in over $245 million, making it the most successful movie of 1972. This movie would go on to be one of Coppola's greatest works outside of Apocalypse Now, and it would mark where his greatness truly began, because this movie would go on to be known as a masterpiece of filmmaking. This movie would go on to be considered great art, and it would mark where Coppola's greatness truly began. This masterpiece would go on to make over $245 million in box office sales, making it the most successful movie of 1972. The Godfather would go on to be a huge success because it would go on to be a great movie that would go on to be considered great art. This movie would go on to be a masterpiece of filmmaking, and it would mark where Coppola's greatness truly began because this movie would go on to be one of Coppola's greatest works outside of Apocalypse Now. The movie would go on to take over $245 million in box office sales, making it the most successful movie of 1972. This movie would go on to be a huge success because it would go on to be considered great art. Coppola would go on to fight for this movie because it would mark where his greatness truly began, because this movie would go on to be a huge success because it would go on to be considered great art. The infamous opening scene would almost have been cut. Opening with The Godfather, when Bonacera begs Don Vito Corleone for justice. It's most certainly one of the most power scenes in movie history. Did it ever occur to you that this famous scene would almost have never been in this movie? Members of this movie thought that this scene moved too slowly and did not go along with this movie style, because some people in charge of this movie thought this scene moved too slowly because it did not go along with this movie style. Instead of going along with Coppola's wishes, this movie would go on to try to cut this movie completely because it did not like it, but Coppola would not have this movie be cut completely because it did not like it, because this movie marked where Coppola's greatness. Frank Sinatra tried to get the film stopped. Number 14. Frank Sinatra tried to get the film stopped. There is still more happening behind the scenes of The Godfather. This is where the legendary singer Frank Sinatra makes an appearance. Sinatra is very irate with the way he is shown in the film. Some believe it is an indirect representation of Sinatra's own life experience. This is in the form of the canonymous Johnny Fontane, who is an extremely popular singer. Fontane asks for the favors of Don Vito Corleone, another main figure in the story. The storyline goes on about the rise of Fontaine's fame in the underworld. This physicalized the rumors about Sinatra's connection with the mafia. Sinatra could have used this association for annotations in films from the Hollywood film industries. Sinatra is very annoyed with the representation shown in the film. This is because it put him down for being an individual with mafia ties for augmentations in films from the Hollywood industries. This is where he attempted more than once for the stopping of the creation process for The Godfather. This was due to the pressure from his affiliates. His affiliates even threatened the directors with lawsuits. Unfortunately for Sinatra, he received opposition from the mafia. This is because the mafia did not expect this from Sinatra. The mafia even used their powerful networks to make an attempt on Sinatra's plan unsuccessful. This is due to the powerful networks being involved on both sides. This film is still proceeding despite the massive dissent from Sinatra. This is attributed to the large networks on both sides. The Godfather still made hit films across the globe despite the massive dissent on the other side. This is where Sinatra is rumored to have had an intellectual change on the matter. However, he is still yet to admit this fact. This is because he never made an actual apology about the occurrence. Although this massive dissent existed on the other side, The Godfather still made many hit films across the globe. This is an attribute for the powerful networks on both sides. This did not mark the very last problem for The Godfather. Instead, this is where the massive chaos begins for the video. There were actual mobsters involved in the set of number 13. There were real mobsters on set. There were true mobster connections involved in the set of The Godfather. So it wasn't just a film about them. There were viewers of the film who found its depiction of the mafia too close to the truth, especially the Italian-American Civil Rights League, who fought back against the film and were led by notorious mobster Joe Colombo. Joe Colombo's fight wasn't just about civil rights. It's also to safeguard the reputation of Italian Americans and ensure that The Godfather doesn't spread misinformation about the mafia. Coppola and the directors of the film struck a deal with the League so that the film wouldn't be halted. They were allowed to proceed so long as the word mafia wasn't draped in the script. However, that's not the only way that mobsters were involved with The Godfather. There were mobsters who were always present while shooting to make sure of what's happening. This added to the authentic feeling of the film. For actor James Caan, also known as Don Pagliacci, the best way to get inside a role is to watch people who have those qualities. Watching how the mobsters acted in everyday situations helped to improve my performance as Sonny. Obviously, the mobsters' involvement made it seem so realistic. There were mobster connections involved in The Godfather, which made the film more like a true-to-life scenario than just a film. Lenny Montana is a mafia enforcer number 12. Lenny Montana was a mob enforcer. Luca Brasi is the bodyguard of the Corleone family. While getting to know more about The Godfather, one of the more fascinating developments is about Lenny Montana's involvement in the film. Montana is not actually an actor. His past job is actually to be the executioner of the mafia. He is so perfect in portraying Brasi since he's 6'6" and actually comes from a mafia. But Montana wasn't so confident in front of the camera as he was out on the streets. He forgot his lines numerous times during his first scenes with Brando because of his nervousness about working with a legend. His nervousness is precisely what Coppola needed for a scene where Luca Brasi talks with Don Vito Corleone to come alive. Coppola accepted Montana's nervousness and didn't attempt to mask it. He is seen reading from a sheet of paper, making this particular scene even more suspenseful and nervously raw, and adding even more material to Brasi's nervous but loyal character as a nervous but loyal guy. Montana's nervousness made this particular scene deep, creepy, and one of the most memorable and terrifying moments in Coppola's The Godfather. I'm honored and grateful that you have invited me to your daughter's wedding. On the day of her wedding is one of the most famous quotes in movie history. Opportunism came from a need to alleviate stress in the actor. James Caan's fight scene was real. Number 11. James Caan's fight scene was real. There's one other memorable part of Coppola's The Godfather when James Caan, Sonny Corleone, gets shot at a toll booth and beaten up by a group of thugs in a fight scene referred to as James Caan's fight scene. It would be one thing for actors who are more like James Caan, who has dedicated his actions as an actor fully, to get a little banged up on a movie shoot if it is one of 1,000 other big action scenes where actors get bumped around a little. But this is not one of these scenarios for a few reasons. First, it is a toll booth setting, a confined space where nothing can protect a person from punches and bullets, so it is a setting ripe for violence. Secondly, it is a movie about a mafia family, so violence is a likely occurrence. Thirdly, it is a setting where these particular actors get a reality check as it pertains to violence, as if they are actually getting ready to face this particular violence in life. Another reason this is not a typical movie fight scene is because James Caan actually gets hurt. It is a setting where Caan gets hit by a squib explosion. A squib is a miniature explosion used in films for gun effect, and it hurts him enough where it looks like a real fight scene. It is a setting where Caan gets a reality check, as it pertains to actual dance moves done in a fight scene. It is a setting where it is a fight scene between a bunch of guys who are opposed to a mafia family, indicating violence is likely. Another reason this is not a typical movie fight scene is because it is a toll booth setting. It is a setting where actually getting hurt is a likely possibility. It is a setting where a reality check in actual dance moves is likely a likely possibility. It is a setting where violence is likely due to a movie about a mafia family. It is a setting where a reality check, as it pertains to actual explosions, is a likely possibility. Another reason this is not a typical movie fight scene is because it is a movie about a mafia family. It is a setting where violence is likely. Caan worked so intensely on the scene that this scene turned out to be an influential part of Sonny's character that revealed his raw anger and his tragic fate. People noticed skill, emotion, and the willingness that Caan showed in real life to take on in order to make one of the most famous fight scenes of all time. Marlon Brando's Oscar speech was boycotted. Number 10. Marlon Brando's Oscar speech was boycotted. There was much talk about Marlon Brando and his Oscar win for his film The Godfather. Although he is well known for his performance in The Godfather, his Oscar win was much appreciated for his strong political statement on that occasion. However, Marlon Brando did not accept his award for Best Actor during the 1973 Oscar award ceremony. Instead, he used that chance to state his powerful opinion. Shortly after that, he passed on his award to Sachin Littlefeather. Sachin Littlefeather was a Native American activist who explained that Brando was boycotting that award because he did not like the fact that the film industry depicted Native Americans on film in a derogatory manner in most of their films that included the story of Native Americans. People in the film industry were clearly upset about the stand that Marlon Brando took about not taking his award. However, his stand not only brought attention to film industry about the social issue that needed attention, but also changed the film industry for good. Still, there were people who did not like what he did on that occasion.